I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. After a two-day break from the Wall Street roller coaster, America's wild ride continues. Joining me now is author, columnist, and member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, Kimberley Strassel. Kim Strassel is now on the podcast, and this is a long time coming because Perino on Politics is where I call up my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And Kim, thank you for doing this. I thought we should tell people about how we first met in 1995. And you're one of the great joys of my life. And you were at the Wall Street Journal at the time. I was working on Capitol Hill. I think you were assigned to do energy and environmental issues, and my boss was the Energy and Power Subcommittee chairman. So that's how we first met, and it's been a great friendship.
Yeah, it's great. And I love to tell this story to my kids, Dana, because the way I always put it is you should never discount the people you know because you never know what they might become. And I said, for instance, I met this young woman. I was a young woman. We were both still new in our careers. We struck up this friendship. And the next thing I knew, I was buddies with the national press secretary for the president.
And I think when we first met, neither of us had been married yet. You hadn't had any children yet. I didn't have any of the Vishlas yet. And it's been amazing to see your career and all of the books that you've done. And the children that you have raised, I adore them. And you also have a podcast. Tell everybody what the name of that podcast is so that they can download.
Yeah, absolutely. All Things with Kim Strassel. It's weekly. And we've got one coming out with Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary.
Love that guy.
So I'm excited about that. And you can sign up for it at the Wall Street Journal or on any of your podcast sites.
The other reason we bonded early on is that we had somewhat similar upbringings and that at least they were in rural America. And you from Oregon and me from Wyoming and Colorado. And I think that has made a difference in our outlook.
Oh, absolutely. I think that this is so important. That's why I'm constantly encouraging people from different walks of life to get into journalism. I think it's something that's missing. And the perspective that comes from growing up in a rural community, which is very different than so many, and there's nothing wrong with growing up in a suburb or a city, but it's just different issues, a different way of looking at life. And we need more of that in many of our institutions. Including
when it comes to conservation. And I'll be interested to hear your conversation with Doug Burgum on your podcast because he also had a similar upbringing and then went on to something we didn't do, which is found an amazing software company and sell it for a ton of money. But he did go back and he was able to take over the family farm, keep that farm in existence or the ranch in existence as it is today, but also to have a great respect for people who make a living off the land, who care for the land, and who don't want government telling them what to do with the land.
We talked about that a lot, and including not just that, but the Interior Department and how much land it owns, and the original philosophy behind that, going back to Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot, the first Forest Department chief. When they said conservation, they believed in using land, maintaining it, but using it for the benefit of the people, which didn't mean locking it up. And I think that ethos is really important. It's one that's being brought back with Doug Burgum and other members of the Trump administration.
One of my favorite pieces of trivia that I learned in the Bush administration, and I'm sure it is still true today, is that the Interior Department brings in more money to the Treasury than the IRS. And it's because of the leasing.
And it could bring in so much more. I mean, he was talking about, you think about it, and you know this, having grown up in the West, there are states where the federal government owns the majority of the land. And then that's not even counting what we have offshore, the extraordinary numbers of acres. And then it's not just energy, it's also grazing leases. There's a lot of different things that can be done to utilize that portfolio. And that's how he talked about it. And that's what I loved about Doug Burgum, is he talked about this extraordinary asset the United States has, which it barely leverages to its advantage.
Isn't that amazing? Well, I do want to talk about another thing that we have been through together as part of our first segment, and that is through this political realignment that we're living through. So when you and I first got to know each other in 1995, most college-educated voters or college graduates were Republicans. That is no longer true. That has changed. The Democrats have basically lost the working class. The Republicans have picked that up. Some of the whole tariff thing gives me heartburn still because I'm a skeptic. I still have conservative principles. When Thomas Sowell of the Hoover Institution out at Stanford did a video last week about his thoughts, I thought, okay, I'm not entirely crazy.
Nope,
That's good to know.
I saw the same thing and had the same thought.
And some of this, I'm like, wait, now you can pull up videos of Pelosi making the same arguments that Republicans are making today. I'm like, wow, what's going on? I feel like I'm in a shape-shifting universe. But my principles remain rock solid. But what do you think is happening either on the policy front or political front?
Here's my macro analysis of what's happened, and I call it irrational political enthusiasm. And this is what I mean. I think Donald Trump is an incredibly gifted politician in that he's extremely good at catching on to what average people are worried about. And when he ran in 2016, he took two of those issues in particular that I do believe the Republican leadership had not paid enough attention to, immigration and trade. He knew that they bothered especially a lot of working class people. And he brought them to the table and said, I'm going to pay more attention to this. But if you step back and you look at what he did, he brought those issues, but the vast majority of what made him successful as a president was following a bog standard, straightforward Reagan agenda, deregulation, tax cuts, like smart management of government. I think what's happened in the ensuing years is too many Republicans have only focused on the success he had with those other issues and doubled down. It's like, well, those are populist issues. We now need to, if Donald Trump made it work with those, if we just do it times 10, we'll be even 10 times more successful. And it's not necessarily true because it's beginning to stomp out a lot of those Reagan principles that really were the foundation of his success. And the other thing I like to remind those Republicans is that a lot of union voters and working class voters voted for Donald Trump even without this kind of way doubling down on populism that we see now. And there can be definitely too much of a good thing.
We had Kellyanne Conway on America's Newsroom today, and she said something that I think is true, that the people who voted for Trump are going to give him a lot more space, time, and grace than the market will. And I think that's true. It doesn't mean, however, that the market isn't going to affect people's lives or prices. And there is a limit to patience when it comes to the American people. It's not just Trump's voters that are being affected. It's everybody. And I do think, if there's a long-term proposition that you can see in the future that is painted clearly, then American people might be able to say, okay, I'm with you. I can see where we're going. I'm on this train with you. I get it. I see where we're going. I look at a lot of this from a communication standpoint, and I felt more confused over the weekend from the administration's commentary because it was kind of all over the map. And then somebody told me, well, that's the strategy. I'm like, okay, great. Then maybe that's true. I don't know. I think that they would be better served by saying, here is the problem we are trying to solve. Here is the way we are proposing to solve it. And that makes it a lot more clear. But if the strategy is to say, we're for this, we're not, we're for that, oh, we're not, actually we are not. And then that makes the state of confusion the strategy until we get to some sort of resolution. Maybe it's brilliant, but I just don't see it yet.
I don't see it either. And let me add in there that in addition to those very good things about here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it, and here's the end game. And that's one of the things that's leading to the extraordinary uncertainty in the market is people don't really know where Trump is headed with this. And I appreciate his ability, the art of the deal. Sometimes you bluff, you make threats because you're trying to get the other person to agree to something you want. And you can't necessarily say what that is. But this is some really big bluffing and really big threatening. And nobody has an idea what the end goal is. Does he want tariffs in and of themselves just because he believes you can fund the whole federal government with them? Or is he attempting to get other countries to lower their own tariff rates in a way that creates a better environment for all trading partners? The latter is one that I'm kind of on board with. I think the first one is one that isn't necessarily been proven in history to be true, no matter what Donald Trump says about the beautiful age of the 1870s. Those people who voted for him, I would caveat that by noting that there is a base, probably 35 or 40%, that really will give him some grace time. There's a lot of people who came over to vote for him, and they're going to be less tolerant of this going on for a long time. And while you're right, the market is not necessarily definitive, it's going to start playing into people's lives. We're living in an economy where everyone has a 401k, where a lot of people have 529s, and they're watching their wealth vanish in front of their eyes.
Mm-hmm. I saw this funny, well, maybe it's not so funny, but I thought it was kind of funny. It was a meme on the internets this weekend. It said, "Your 401k is now 401." Isn't that funny, everybody? But setting aside tariffs, because we don't know what's going to happen. You have written for years, and I've learned a lot from you about how Congress has abdicated its responsibility as a co-equal branch of government for a long time. And one of the things that is very popular that President Trump has been doing is Elon Musk's DOGE effort. Now, I say broadly popular. You can nitpick, and believe me, I have people that say it's not being done well and it's not being done transparently, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, broadly, it is popular to find waste, fraud, and abuse in government, to make the computer systems more up to date so that, for example, the Veterans Administration's computer system can talk to the DOD computer system so that we don't have to strap paperwork to military members' bodies when they are en route from one hospital to the next. I mean, all of that is broadly popular. But you've made a point in your column, and I wanted to have you explain that to people here, because we kind of keep it at a 30,000-foot level here on this podcast. None of this is permanent unless Congress also acts. And Congress loves to spend money. So do you see the possibility of Congress in the time while they have the majority of figuring out a way to make these DOGE cuts permanent?
We're about to find that out. And by the way, I think we're going to find it out in the next week or two. Okay. Because right now, and I'm just unleashed on this is a sham. You've got all of these Republicans running around saying, "Go, Elon, go." And by the way, I'm rooting for it, and I agree with you. The vast majority of the American people, the press can write all the headlines they want about this or that outrage from this or that firing or change. Most Americans love what they're seeing. They think it's overdue that the federal government has not had someone really look under the hood and shake things up in a long time. So great that Republicans are saying this, but here's the reality. Elon Musk can cancel this or that contract, cancel this or that grant. If Congress just comes back around next year in the next spending cycle and says one of two things: A, you must spend this money, and now this time we're going to be very specific about how it must be spent and where it's going to be spent, or says, "Oh, thanks for those savings. We'll roll it into this new program. Look at all the new money we have to spend again." Right. Then none of this actually goes away. And the reason this matters in the next couple of weeks is Senator Ron Johnson and some other senators whose support will be key to making this budget reconciliation process work have said, you do not have our vote unless we set up a process whereby Congress is replicating what Elon Musk is doing. We're going to sit down. We're going to have a committee. It's going to go line through line from every line item spending in the budget and say, this we don't need and this we do, and make some decisions. I mean, you know how this works in Congress, Dana. I mean, basically some guy, staffer, hands you a piece of paper, and the big choice these guys make is, will we increase spending across the board 2% or 4%? Let's think about that. And they haven't done their job. They complain all the time, oh, power of the purse, but they don't do any of the work involved.
And do you think they know that?
I think they like to spend. And I think that this is just becoming something that needs to be highlighted. And Donald Trump needs to be embarrassing about this. He talks a lot about how he wants to stop spending. Good example. So Ron Johnson and others, here's what they're proposing. not only to do this committee, but with a goal of returning us to the 2019 spending levels we had. So the year right before COVID
okay.
hit. And by the way, upwardly adjusted for population growth and for inflation. But he's like, we need to go through and all this new spending over the past 5 years, 60% more than we were spending 5 years ago. Where is all that going, and why can we not just get rid of it? We're not living in emergency pandemic times right now. And if we could do that, folks, we could shave more than $700 billion a year off spending. Now, put that in contrast to what Republicans are saying. Well, maybe if we really get serious, we can cut 1.5 trillion over 10 years. Yeah, I know. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the difference. And apparently Trump bought into this notion, gave them his assurance he'd be behind it. So now we got to see if the Republican leaders are serious about doing it.
We shall see. And we will be right back after a quick break. And we're back with more Perino on politics. Kim, I wanted to maybe zoom out a little bit and ask for not just your thoughts about policy, but about parenthood and the education of children, not just yours, but overall. I mean, I am I'm distraught about the nation's education system and the failure for 50% or more of the kids that cannot even read, write, or do basic math in 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade, and yet they're graduating anyway. And even if we continue on that path with no changes, I'm worried. I'm worried about what kind of jobs they will get in the future. And I also am a limited government kind of person. I don't think the government can fix this, but I'm not sure American parents are able to fix it on their own because they're also working and busy. And our public education system was the envy of the world for so long, and now it is not. And I'm pretty distraught about it. I realize that a lot of places are implementing school choice, but it's not happening quickly enough and widely enough for enough parents to be able to take advantage of it, nor necessarily should it, right? Our public schools should be able to work. And I'm looking for the Democrat who is going to have a Sister Souljah moment and say, I am going to be the champion of these children. This is a civil rights issue of our time, and yet it just doesn't happen. Am I overwrought or on the right track?
Well, if you're overwrought, I'm overwroughting there with you because everything you just said is absolutely correct. We should be embarrassed. I mean, we love as Americans to thump our chest and talk about how we are the best nation in the world. And I think that is true in so many regards, especially with regard to freedom and entrepreneurialism. We are pathetic when it comes to our education. So many nations take this so much more seriously than we do. And I think the problem is that we've got a lot of rewinding and changing we need to do. I really do believe that a huge moment in time when things began to go backward was when we created the Department of Education. And we suddenly said this was something that the federal government should play a major role in. And essentially what the Department of Education does, it's got tens of billions of dollars in grants, which it withholds. It's just a piggy bank. And it makes all of these districts around the whole country run around filling out grant applications to get money for this or that. But the bigger problem, Dana, is that it takes local administrators and states off the hook to a certain degree to their outcomes and the way they do their curriculum and their teaching standards. We need to return it entirely to the states. By the way, the government that's closest to you is always the best. It's most responsive. I go to school board meetings and I'm constantly encouraging people, instead of watching the news and wringing your hands over what's happening in Washington, go to your local school board meeting and make a difference there. And we have to kind of reinstall that ethos in people. It's happening. And that's the thing that should encourage you. COVID was a huge wake-up call for a lot of parents, and we are seeing changes in school boards. But that's an even greater reason why I'm happy to see what's happening at the federal level and Trump trying to shut this down, because now is the moment to do that, to encourage that state flourishing and that state involvement.
I loved it that Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, when she heard that the Democrats were out front of her building having a press conference, she said, well, I'll just go join them. And I loved that sort of chutzpah, I guess you would say, but also her commitment and dedication to helping make this problem better, even if that includes what the president has asked her to do, which is to dismantle the federal Department of Education. That doesn't mean that education is going away. What it means is what you're saying, which is the state and local governments should do it. And if I'm looking for a silver lining, let me point out 3 states that have been doing a lot better, maybe 4. And they are southern states for the most part: Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas were at the very bottom of the list for test results. But in the last 4 years, they have improved things. And so that is very encouraging. And one of the ways that they did is they forgot new math and they forgot new type of reading, and they went to phonics and flashcards. And now their kids are figuring out how to do, carry the one and be able to read out loud with a strong voice and to remember what they were reading. And I guess I hesitate in a way to be talking about this so much because I don't have children of my own. That doesn't mean I can't care about things that are happening and look at it. But I also think, one, we've got a national security problem. We have an economic problem. These kids are going to have to compete against all these other kids in the world, and they're competing for their attention from their phones. So if I'm looking for silver linings, I think those 4 states have really shown that there is a way to get back on track.
Absolutely. And by the way, you have every right to talk about this. You have cared about this so much. I still remember you during COVID, during storytime hour for kids.
That's right.
They were stuck at home. That's
Did your kids do that?
Reading and books.
Or were they too young?
Oh. No, I think they were actually a little old at the time.
I remember I said, I will do this for 2 weeks. And basically, so for people that don't know, I used to have a show at 2:00 called The Daily Briefing with Dana Perino. And when it ended, about 15 minutes later, I would do a Facebook Live where I would read some sort of storybook to kids. And I thought I would just do it for 2 weeks. I ended up doing it for like 3 or 4 months. And I thought,
People
wait,
loved it.
I can't keep doing this forever. I thought COVID was going to last 2 weeks. Not that it would last 2 weeks, but that we would only be shut down for 2 weeks. But you're right. People love story time. It's why I love Audible to this day, or audiobooks.
Oh, I know. And you might remember we actually collaborated with the help of my kids and came up with a book of sort of a list of great books that kids could read during COVID.
That's right. So that's the other way that you and I bonded over the years, is through our love of reading, and especially for me, fiction. And I know you like fiction too, but I read a lot more of it.
I just went into, I finished reading Green Dot at your suggestion.
Oh, did you like it?
Thank you. Yeah, I did.
The sentences are great.
Generation of voice for me, which was good for me to read. So.
Yes. So Green Dot is written by a woman named Madeline Gay, and she is Australian, now living in the UK. It was my colleague John Glenn's favorite book of last year, and anything he likes, I always read. I just finished reading Famous Last Words. I needed like a quick read. Wow, that was great. 48 hours of reading pleasure. That book by Gillian McAllister. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, welcome to Book Talk with Dana and Kim.
Yeah, I know. We could do this all day.
We could, but we'll take a quick break and be right back. And we're back with Perino on Politics for the final segment. Kim, this is where I like to ask my friends what I'm missing. What are you paying attention to that maybe others aren't, because you're so well read and you have a way of looking across things and analyzing in a way that's so smart. What are you looking at now that we might not have on our radar?
Well, you touched on one, and thank you, which was the role of Congress here. And I just think there needs to be a lot more attention being paid, not to Republicans praising Elon Musk, but to what they are doing themselves to get on board with a Trump agenda that's about right-sizing the federal government. That's one. But the other one is something we were just kind of touching on as well, which is watch this space. I think that there's going to be a lot more headlines and news to come in the coming months and years in terms of the state's role in that Trump agenda. Meaning, one thing that you can do in the federal government if you want to change dramatically policy or programs, you get Congress to act. The other thing that we know presidencies have the power to do, because Biden did it a lot, although not in ways that I disagreed with, is you can give states more flexibility to run their programs themselves and along the way to innovate and and because these are the laboratories of democracy. So I think we're starting to see this happen. I think it was only last week, there was an event in West Virginia. And as part of that, the new West Virginia Governor, Patrick Morrisey, said that his state is applying for a waiver from the federal government to be able to ban some things that are currently on the list of SNAP approved food. So essentially the modern name for food stamps.
It's much more catchy.
Yes, it is SNAP. Yeah, SNAP. and this is, so he was specifically talking about, you've got a lot of governors that are talking about taking sugary sodas off that list. I mean, and that's a policy debate to be had, but they're talking about that.
I tried to remind someone the other day. Yeah, I tried to remind someone the other day. I'm like, you want to see a big fight? Start talking about, should the government tell people what they can and cannot eat? Right. Do you remember those fights?
Yes. And, there are aspects of this that I do not like. This whole kind of make America healthy thing again. I'm like, why is this any different than Michael Bloomberg saying I can't have my big gulp, or trying to like take all the salt out of food? I mean, people should be allowed to make their own decisions about what they consume and what they eat. I think the debate is a little bit different when you get into food stamp money, because that is a question about what the federal government is funding. And we've always had restrictions on SNAP items, by the way. It's just a question of how broad or narrow they're going to be. So that's a policy debate to have. But this broader thing was like, well, you need to be healthy again, and we'll tell you how to eat. That I'm not a big fan of.
Right.
But I think we're going to get just on this waiver point, because Patrick Morrisey also talked about how he, as part of this waiver application, also wanted to trial some new work requirements, et cetera, as a part of the food stamp program. You're going to see states that are asking for Medicaid waivers, ways to run their programs more efficiently, or again, work rules, et cetera. And these are an opportunity to take some of these big flabby federal programs and throw them out there into those laboratories of democracy and see if you don't get something that works better.
It's so interesting. I could talk to you for hours. I am going to get to talk to you next week on your podcast, I believe. I don't know when you're going to air it.
For your new book.
Yes.
For your new book.
It's a good little book. It's called I Wish Someone Had Told Me. And it's a collection of career and life advice with an update post-COVID. And the one thing two things are different in this book is that, first of all, the previous one, Everything Will Be Okay, was specifically targeted to young women. This new one is not. It is everyone can play at this. Everyone can play. And then the other thing is that I don't just rely on myself. I have tons of fabulous colleagues, smart friends, my husband, other people that I have relied on that I interviewed throughout the book. So it's like a good one-stop shopping place for graduates or people mid-career, or those like you, Kim, who have figured out how to manage career and family. And you've done it. So I know that it probably feels like I didn't do it perfectly, but from where I sit, you did it very, very well.
Well, I have 2 teenage daughters at the moment, so I feel like I've done everything very unperfectly, but I don't know if that's me or them. So
yes, well, they're wonderful, wonderful. And so are you. Everybody should read Kim Strassel. She has a column on Fridays in the Wall Street Journal. You should read the Wall Street Journal, Review and Outlook every single day. You should also listen to her podcast. And also there's a newsletter, too. I signed up for that as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that just started a couple months ago, and it's doing it. That you get to have that on. It comes out on Wednesdays, so yeah,
that's
it's
right.
Exciting.
Also, we will leave with a little secret word that she and I share together. It doesn't describe us, but it describes somebody from our past. Beleaguered is the word.
Beleaguered. And we're not going to tell that story.
Never, ever forget. Never forget. Okay, Kim Strassel, thank you so much for being on Perino on Politics.
Dana. Thanks.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.